Rolex. Today, I want to talk about how Rolex, for me, as a marketer, is one of my favorite brands. And also, I feel like Rolex symbolizes individual success and also excellence. And this is something that really inspires me, gives me energy, and motivates me every single day. I was talking to someone yesterday about, um, I guess we were just going back and forth a little bit regarding our days and how we spend our days. And there was a point in my life when I had very little energy. I felt like I was always tired. I always had headaches, or I think mentally and physically, I just felt very defeated. And this caused me to just want to kind of lay around and be lazy and not really move a lot. And if you know anything about stagnant water, I remember learning this years ago in high school probably, and I've never forgotten it because one of the signs of stagnant water, if you're ever out in the wild, let's say, or on a camping trip, and you come across a small body of water, if you notice that there's no movement in the water, literally you look at it, I've seen this before, you look at it, there's no fish, there's no water trickling sound, it's just sitting there and it's still. That is a sign of stagnation. Basically, that means if you were to take a cup, scoop up that water and take a drink of it, most likely there is something very dangerous in the water, whether bacteria or who knows. There could be a number of things, but stagnant water means death. And for me, I think a lack of movement also means death. Not to get too personal, but if you've ever experienced the passing of someone, you will notice that their final months, weeks, days are, they're less active. There's less movement. And I think that this is just a good, and for some people maybe an emotional reminder that we must have movement in our lives as long as we're alive, as long as we're healthy. And if you woke up this morning, I'm very happy for you. And unfortunately, there are many people who were awake yesterday who are not today. And this, for me, is how I like to think about life, because I think I'm not afraid to talk about death. I know that this life is one of a kind. This life is very special. It is an amazing experience. And with life comes death, and with death comes life. So I think we need to embrace that. We need to remember to have movement. And this actually reminds me of something I was reading about Rolex. First of all, the founder, Hans, is, he has a really inspiring story. He was an orphan, and he met a classmate and made a friend who was from Switzerland. And Hans is German, and so this kid is sort of chatting with his Swiss friend about how back in Switzerland there are pocket watches being designed and being made. And I think this is what really planted the seed for Hans. And at the time, believe it or not, I don't have a pocket watch on me, nor do I have a wristwatch, but pocket watches were the thing. And it's interesting because if you look at advertisements or any stories about watches at the time, pocket watches were considered a very masculine thing, and men preferred to have pocket watches. It was very rare that you would see a man wearing a wristwatch. Wristwatches were actually considered sort of a jewelry piece that women would wear. And so Hans, thinking about this, meeting his friend, being inspired, eventually starts working for a company that I believe distributes pocket watches. And he sees an opportunity. He realizes that one of the reasons why men at the time were not wearing wristwatches was because they were considered to not necessarily be reliable. There's a lot of technology behind a watch. I think these days we take it for granted. We don't really think about what is actually happening, especially with a non-digital watch. You'll see, if you look at a Rolex, you'll see on the face, typically it'll say chronometer, and a chronometer is it's a form of a non-digital watch. And so there's a lot of things happening within this device. Anyways, he goes on to see this opportunity, and he starts a business with his brother-in-law, and Rolex is born. But what I wanted to sort of talk about is the idea of the oyster technology. You'll see, again, if you look at the face of a Rolex, it says oyster. And this is really cool to me because I love innovation. I love technology. I work for a generative AI company. We do marketing for banks primarily. And essentially we build experiments, multivariate tests to test marketing language to see what language resonates with banks' customers, with their target customers, their customer segments, their ideal customer personas. These are all sort of targeting language that we use. And so I love innovation. I love being sort of on the cutting edge. And so people who are able to innovate and think up new ideas like Hans. And back to the oyster, think of an oyster. It is sitting at the bed of an ocean, and in fact it's fully encapsulated. There's no water, there's no pressure getting into this oyster. And so this is the technology that Hans applies to Rolex, which revolutionizes the wristwatch technology and sort of creates a movement and makes everyone go crazy for Rolexes. That's why today, no matter where you are watching this video, you know what I mean when I say Rolex. Anyways, back to innovation and technology. There's a lot of movement, speaking of movement, happening in the world. I live in the United States. Currently, I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm here for the first time. I work remotely, and so I'm traveling and visiting places that I always wanted to see and experience for myself, and Austin was on my list. Before this, I went to South Africa, of all places, and I lived there for about 6 months, and then Arizona, where I'm from originally, then California, now Austin. So I'm here, exploring, and I'm seeing what the city has to offer. And I think that there's a lot of change, there's a lot of movement in our world. I come from a small farming town. My father actually tells stories of waking up early and with his siblings and his parents, working the fields in the East Valley in Arizona, Gilbert, if anyone is familiar with that town. We have gone from days where we rely on manual labor and individual knowledge, really specialized knowledge, to now the world is very much powered by technology. Whether it's through entertainment platforms like YouTube or the iPhone or ChatGPT or Netflix. I feel like over the last few decades, I was born in 1995, so I remember a time when people weren't always on their phones, looking at their phones, and when you're in a room, you know the feeling when you're in a room, or let's say on a bus, or in an elevator. If people are around each other, the first thing, get on their phone, because I think we have sort of become uncomfortable with this human interaction. When I walk the streets here in Austin, I'm alone. I don't know anyone. I don't have any friends or family. I'm looking around and I'm trying to make eye contact with people just to say hello or maybe have a conversation. And I've noticed that almost everyone, literally 95% of people who I encounter on the street, and yeah, I understand I'm a stranger, so why make eye contact with me, but many people avoid eye contact. So I think technology is changing a lot, and that is one of the reasons why I decided to work in tech and to dive headfirst into generative AI, and they call it Martech and RegTech. That's sort of the I guess the subcategories within the industry that I work. But I think it's very important to just be aware of these changes and this movement, and to make sure that you are trying to, I guess, be have as much motion as possible in your life. I have memories of certain people in my life who don't have much movement in their day-to-day. And I get it. It's nice to chill. It's nice to relax. It's nice to just rest. But when your lack of motion is due to maybe you being unhappy with yourself, maybe you've had a tough time and you'd rather just sleep. I get it. And I've been in those moments. I've experienced that myself. But I promise you that the more you move, the more you get up and get some sunshine and read something, or read the latest news about AI, or go ahead and research Rolex like I did. You have to busy yourself with things that will sort of propel you forward, because once you start to move, you will create momentum. And when you have momentum, there's this thing called kinetic energy. Go ahead and go and Google kinetic energy after this. And my hope is that your kinetic energy today will be more than it was yesterday. And I promise you again that if you start to move and introduce motion into your day to day, the momentum will shift, the energy will change, and your life will transform.